Hello, and welcome to part one of Indie Authors I Have Read More Than Once. So I have been wanting to make these videos for a while now to sort of showcase my favorite indie authors that I have read over the last 5 or so years since I've really started binging indie author books. And I've read, God, so many. I've probably read close to 100 different indie authors. But to narrow it down would be tough. So I wanted to do my top 20, but I needed to sort of make it a little easier for myself to come up with a list. So I made it so that it's only people that I've read more than one book of. So if I've read one of your books, but that's all, I didn't put you on the list. I just want the people that have been, that I've read multiple times on here. And if I have read you multiple times and you didn't make the list, don't think that it's because your books are bad or your writing is bad. I have a specific taste for what I like as far as genre goes. Of course, I am a horror author, and that's what I love. I also love thrillers, suspense, paranormal, murder mysteries, even some comedy here and there. I love a lot of different things. Now, so that's what I really kind of in my go-tos. But I know there's also romance authors out there, and I really don't do the romance very well. I'm not really into the romance or the smut or anything like that. Now, I can be a romantic person though. Hey girl, did you fart? Because you blew me away. And that's why I don't do romance. Anyway, let's start the countdown. At number 20, we have Zintra Sullivan. Now, I've been reading Zintra Sullivan for several years now. My first book of hers was called Once Upon a Death. This is a series of books called The Days of Death, and it surrounds, well, basically death. He's retired, and he's moving along, but he's finding himself in trouble. And this is considered mythology, folklore, in those categories, but it's kind of like dark humor as well. So if you love that kind of dark fantasy humor kind of thing, you should try the Days of Death series. There's 5 books, I believe, if not more. I know there's a new one coming out, or the new one that is out called The Death Clause, the most recent one. It's a novella. I think it's around centered around death being at Christmas time or something. I've got it on my Kindle. I need to read that one. But very funny books about death wandering around the earth. And that's not the only thing she's written, though. She's written a series called the Alpala Clan. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but that's more of a sci-fi mythology folklore kind of a series. And I read the first book in that called Immersion. I'm not as much into the mythology, folklore kind of books, but it's very well written. She's a very well written author. So I would highly recommend, if you have not checked out Zintra Sullivan's work, definitely give her a try. And I would recommend Once Upon a Death, the first book in the Days of Death series, if you're reading it for the first time. A lot of fun. I know you will like it. All right, up next at number 19, we have David Washburn. He is the author of such books as Devils That Pray and DIY Exorcism. And the most recent one that I read, a novella called The Tickle Monster. I love that name. It's so cool. That novella is set in kind of colonial times and involves kind of a monster in the woods. I've written about that before. So very fun. But Devils That Pray was my first encounter with David Washburn's work. That is a book about a group of travelers who happen upon this town of the hillbilly cultists, a very violent group, and they get kind of stuck in the middle and are now fighting for their lives. So he's a very vicious author with some of these scenes. They're brutal. If you love that kind of horror, definitely check him out. David Washburn, number 19, definitely one that I'm going to keep on my TBR. All right, up next at number 18, Alan Shivers. He is the author of the European Halls trilogy, and this is a slasher trilogy that really takes you back to kind of an 80s horror vibe to it. All right, if you loved Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, anything like that, even into the 90s with like Scream, I know what you did last summer, those kind of things, you get those vibes with the European Halls books, at least the first one. I've only read the first one. I do have the other 2 on my Kindle. I'm going to hopefully read those at some point here in the near future. But the first one really took me back to that 80s slasher feel, and I love it when I find books like that. So if you're into that, that is the kind of books you're going to get if you read Alan Shivers. There's also one that I've read called The Namaste Slasher, and that book is begins a different series. It's actually a series entitled, I've got it pulled up here, just the Slasher series, or sorry, Killer Vocals, the Slasher series. There's a new one out called Killer Vocals, and I believe the Namaste Slasher is believed to be the prequel to that. So that'll be a continuation of that story, which is good because that story did seem like it could keep going, and what good slashers always do. So yeah, Alan Shivers, the author of the European Halls and the Killer Vocals series. Definitely check him out if you are into that nostalgic 80s and 90s style of horror. All right, at number 17, Jill D. Anderson, not to be mistaken for Gillian Anderson from The X-Files, but Jill Anderson writes in multiple genres. I've seen books that are drama, thrillers, and her new one called The Storm Within. It kind of looks like a real, I don't know if it's got horror to it, but it's definitely got some thrilling elements by the looks of it. I've got it on my Kindle. I can't wait to read it. But I've read, the first book I read of hers was called The Chosen Seven. That was kind of a domestic terrorism thriller. I read that one back in 2020 maybe, or 2021. I read it. It was one of the first I want to say the first 5 indie books I ever read. That was one of them. And I've read others books of her as well. She's been away from writing for a little while, but now she's back with her new novel, The Storm Within, and I'm really looking forward to reading that one. It looks like a real thrilling tale. So definitely check out Jill D. Anderson. You will not be disappointed. All right, at number 16, we have K.L. And I've read several of her books, including the first 2 books in the Light trilogy. My favorite one, What Hides in the Darkness. Now, K.L., as many of you know, is more of a romance author, but she also writes in kind of a dark fantasy thriller types as well, and that's what I think a lot of this Darkness trilogy is about. A lot of paranormal elements, like in her novella I read also called Pretty Guilty. Great quick read about ghosts, and it's a fun read. So if you like, I want to say romance, but also kind of those thrilling elements, this is an author to definitely check out. Name's again K.L. She's got several books out there. Check her out on Amazon, and hope you enjoy.